Hello, I'm Frank Conkling, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. And for this workshop, we're going to look at parcel fabric adjustments. And I want to be clear what this is. This is adjusting parcels that are in your parcel fabric at the moment, but it is not least squares adjustment. It is rather, how do I take the geometry, make it better, or what happens when I have new geometry that I want to go and replace something that's in there? How do I take and adjust those parcels that are in there? So let's start off just by saying we are with Panda Consulting. If you want more information about Panda Consulting, go ahead and take a scan of the QR code there. It will get you to our website, and you'll see who we are, what we do, upcoming events, and our blogs and everything. Feel free to go and do that. Also, if you're here in person, just know that you can go ahead and take any comments or go ahead and any questions that you might have and put them over in the chat window. And Chris will actually be going and moderating the chat window. So he'll go and interrupt me if I don't see what's been posted, and make sure that everything, your comments are taken care of and your questions are taken care of. All right, so let's start. Okay, so what happened was I was at a conference here a couple of weeks ago, and I had several of my existing clients come up and say, you know, Frank, we love the parcel fabric. We like the way it works, but we've got a problem in that we don't quite know how to go and adjust some of the parcels that we have in there. When we have new information, how do we adjust it? How do we go through the thought process? And they asked me, can you help us think through that thought process? When do you make the adjustments? How do you make the adjustments? What tools do you do? That's what we're going to try and do today. And if you look here, you're going to see the things we're going to cover. We're going to cover, for example, just simple movements in ArcGIS Pro and make sure we understand how things get adjusted and when and why they get moved, that sort of thing. We're going to demonstrate that and make sure that we understand this whole concept of topology and map topology in here. And then we're actually going to look at some of the parcel fabric tools in here, things like Align Features and Merge Points and Align Parcels and Shrink to Seed and Reconstruct Parcels. There's a lot of confusion. They're great tools, but there's confusion as far as when and where we should go and use them. Let's get started. All right. So the first thing we want to do is look at this and recognize that the important thing when we're doing this is to think about whether or not we want to take the existing features that are associated with a record and move those, or whether or not we're looking for replacement components on here. The first couple of adjustments that you see here are just going to be really simple adjustments. So for example, and I want to make sure that we understand this. If I go to my quality tab, I now have topology turned on, and this can either be map topology or this can be the parcel fabric topology. It's either one, because the reality is the parcel fabric topology really is a structural topology. It doesn't really understand, or it doesn't enforce how things are related to one another. That's all map topology that does that. And what that means is, for example, if I go and select this one point here, if I select a point and I decide to move that point, right, if I have map topology turned on, as I move that point, anything else that is connected to that point automatically would move. So if I go and move that point, it will move the point, it will move the lines, it will move the polygons. Anything that's associated with that point will be moved. So if I undo that now and turn off my topology and now go in here and move my selected point, all right, I move my selected point, notice nothing rubber bands, it doesn't move anything at all in here. So the difference is whether or not we have topology mapped or whether we do not have topology maps. And whether it's actually going to have any impact on the adjustments and the changes that we're doing. So let's look at a couple of really simple ones. And you already saw one here in that I took a point and moved that point over. And with map topology turned on, you can do that on any of these. Well, I have here a set of construction lines. And these construction lines basically are just, I use them as a guide, and this is a good suggestion. If you're looking at adjusting things, make sure you have a scratch layer or something that you can go and say, I want to move it to here. I want to adjust it to here. So again, we could go in here and tweak this and say, we want to move this point here, all right, over to here, and let it snap to that point. And when you say, yeah, it can go and adjust it. Now, what that's doing is it's actually going and just taking that geometry and making the adjustment on there. It is not changing any of the Kogel values that are there. So when we do that, we want to make sure not just that the distance is valid, but also there's other components on it that are valid also. So we just want to be aware of that. Now that's when we move a simple point. What happens if we have a line that is selected, and I'm only going to select this one line here. There's one line there. I'm going to go in that, do that, and then I'm going to move that line. Now, when I do a move, again, I get a yellow anchor. That's the selection anchor, and that's going to be the snap anchor. If I want to go and move my snap anchor, I can go and move my cursor where I want it to go and click with a control key, and it will move that snap anchor up there. I can then go in here and move this and tell it to snap to there. And when I do that, it will move everything that's associated with that line. It will move the points. It will move the polygons. It will move all of that and adjust them to where they should be. This is not Parcel Fabric. This is ArcGIS Pro. And this is just simple adjustments on adjusting geometry using map topology. All right. And again, this is pretty simple stuff. Notice, even though I had an active record, I've not added anything. I've not deleted anything. So nothing gets marked with the global ID of that active record. I have one active, but I really didn't do anything that invoked the Parcel Fabric at all. Again, you want to go and understand, when does it get impacted? When does it not get impacted? All right. So these are just simple movements that we're going to do here. We're going to go to the next level of advanced adjustments that we want to go and do, and look at the Align Features tool. This Align Features tool is one in which it will allow you to go and move things by not actually tweaking the individual parcels, but rather going and drawing a line. And I'm going to up my buffer here to about 10 feet, and then I'm going to draw a line and say, I want to go from here to here. All right, and I'll look and I'll see where my buffer is. And what the Align Features tool is going to do is it's going to look at all the vertices that are located inside of my buffer tolerance and move those vertices perpendicular to the path that I draw. And I'm looking and I didn't catch this one, I didn't catch this one, I didn't catch this one. So I can maybe move this up to 15. Works fine. Some of the more advanced techniques is once you get to that point, you can say, well, maybe I only want to do them on the left side of my path or only the right side of my path, or maybe I only want to do the square off at the ends if I'm doing some very strange things in there. Those are more advanced techniques, but you want to understand the principles of what this Align Features tool does. It really will go and look for all vertices that are located inside that that path, that buffer on that path. The other thing is that with the Align Features tool, you want to look at the Allow Aligning Features without a selection. In this case, it will go and align everything that without having anything selected. So if I click on Align here, it will go and take those and move them over. All right, move them over and align them up. Now, again, it does not change any of the COGO values that are on there. So in this case, I went from having this COGO value, which was some angular value, not a cardinal value, and it kept that value when it moved it over. So by using a simple tool here, I may have been enhancing the geometry of this parcel, but I may have been corrupting or using invalid information for my actual COGO values on here. So again, you want to just be aware of what this is doing and how it's actually working on here. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. You need to know your data. All right. Any questions on this?
None so
Yes.
far.
Okay. By the way, Pat, you were right. It was at WLIA that I was going and talking to some people up there, and the question was, how do we do these, Frank? We don't quite know and understand. So let's go and look at another bookmark here. This is the realign. So here's one that's really interesting. Is I've got at the very top of this, it looks overall like, oh, it should be working, it should fit. But if I actually go and do an analysis of this, of these tax parcels, and say, show me areas where there might be problems, if I go and look, there's actually a little gap here, or an overlap in here. How do I fix that on here? And there's a couple ways of doing it. The easiest one in this case is you can go in here and just do an Align Features, draw the straight line from here to here. All right, and say, go ahead and align this, and it will go, oh, look at that. Look at that, what that's actually doing. So it may be that I actually had too large of a tolerance here, and perhaps I want to go and do something similar to this and see how this works. All right. So again, you want to make sure, just to go and show you here to there to there, you want to make sure that you have your tolerance set correctly on here when you're using this Align Features tool. It's a great tool. I love it. But know how it works and what's going on there. Another thing is that when I'm looking at Align Features, I often have examples like this, where I've got curves that intersect and they have other things coming back. By the way, this is actually called when a curve comes up and then turns direction and goes in a non-tangential way. It's called a cusp of a curve. That's the cusp of a curve on this one parcel here. And if I were to use Align Features here, and I would just do something real simple, let's go into an endpoint curve here and go here to there. Watch what happens right here. Because it's looking to go and move things inside the areas that we just went and identified that we should move all vertices inside of there. So let me undo that again. Now I'll show you the way to go and handle when you're dealing with these types of cusps. And it's not just cusps of curves, but very short cusps between individual lines, is something like this. And again, this isn't a pretty advanced technique, but once you start using this tool, you realize it's something that you need to learn how to go and use. And in this case, we're going to make sure that we return all the way so that we identify the entire geometry that we want to go and clean up. In this case, it's going to, that curve's going to work. That point's going to stay there. It's actually going to remove these vertices in here. And then it's going to come back here on here like that. Actually, those are on another layer. So sorry about that. But notice it didn't change the geometry. And go back here a couple times. Here's this one. And let's go back. Okay. So there it is. So again, when you've got these cusps where you've got points that are very sharp angles, you want to be aware of that and recognize that you may need to go and put not just one line in, you may have to show it what that overall shape is supposed to be like in this parcel. All right. That's, I can tell you, is one of the areas where people tend to have problems with this. I'm going to turn my construction lines off. Here's a problem that we often have is that we'll have gaps or overlaps. And again, we could use the Align Features tool to go and do this, but I can notice that we're going to have a couple issues. For example, we've got a point here, we've got a point here, we've got these 2 points that we want to pull together, and we want to go and bring it back here. If we do Align Features and go from here to here, oh, sorry, not a curve. We want to go into a straight line here, and then a straight line here. We have to increase this. This is probably 30 feet wide, not even that, it's more than that. 40 feet wide, nope. Let's try 50 feet wide. It just gets it, but let's go up 55. Well, look at what's going to happen. We also are going to capture this one here. So we almost have to then say, well, let's put a point there to go and make sure it doesn't move. It complicates it. So that simple tool can't be used for everything. You have to go and recognize that there are times when you should use it and times you shouldn't use it. So in this case, I'm looking at this and I can see, because I have points on the end, that these are parts of a parcel fabric. So I can use the tool called Merge Points tool. This Merge Points tool, I can go in here and just select the group of points, and it goes and shows me the 2 points and gives me the options that if I preserve point number 1, it gives me a preview here what it's going to look like. If I were to go and merge them into 2, it will show me what those points are going to look like. This only works if you have points, 2 points on here. The other example that I just gave you where I didn't have a point, but I wanted to move that all down so it was coincident, that wouldn't work with merge points. I have to have points in here to go and do this. Another option in here is whether or not removal of lines between them, whether that's allowed or not. Because if I have topology set up and I have that unchecked and there were a line there that would be deleted or disappear, it would give me a topology graph error. And that's often one of the things that people experience, and they're like, well, I can't do it with that. How do I do this? You want to make sure that this is allow the removal of lines in here. And then I can just say, go ahead and merge this thing out. Again, this is a cleanest way to go and do this, where you've got misalignments between parcels and they have corresponding points between them. That's by far the best way to go and do the cleanups on here. So let's look at another one here. And this is where you're going to see me using this one a lot, this example here. And what I've done is I've said, I've got a construction of a new parcel, and that new parcel has slightly different geometry than the old parcel. How do I go and build this thing again? And when I look at this, I'm going to turn off my construction lines for a minute here. When I look at this, I see that this parcel seems to be good. This line here, I've got one single line from here to here and here to here, and these all look good. But this line here, it actually looks like originally it was constructed with multiple lines. All right, I want to go and try and clean that up as much as I can. And at 3.1, which is the version I'm using, but I think it's also in 3.01 or 02, there's a new tool called Reconstruct Boundaries. Now, what that tool will do is it will take, and again, this is a parcel fabric tool, it will take the record and analyze the lines associated with the record. And if the line is within tolerance, it will go and add the lines up and aggregate them up and create it and replace them with one line. Just sort of to show you, if I go and do this and real quickly go to a copy lines 2, just to here, it's going to show me. Let's undo that. It's probably not the way to go and do this. Maybe I can do it this way instead. Let's go and first select this parcel and say activate this parcel. Now, let's say just show only records on this parcel, and let's look at the lines on here. All right, and here's the lines that we have, and you'll see that we have 1, 2, 260. So these lines right here, there's this one there, and this one there, and this one here. I may want to clean that up and replace that with just a single line instead. By the way, did you pick up on what I just did here? A way for me to isolate a parcel and see what's really related, what made up that individual parcel that I built. And I did that by going in and doing a couple things. I selected the parcel. Then I came down and I said, activate the record of the parcel that I had selected. And it will go and activate that record. I then, once I had an active record, I went over to show only my active record so I can isolate it and not have to deal with all the other adjoining parcels or all the other adjoining lines that were on here. I could analyze this to figure out what it really is and what makes up this one parcel in here. This technique is really helpful when you're trying to go back and clean up and identify and figure out what was used to build these things. And I'm going to build on this concept as I move forward. All right, I'm going to show everything again. I still have one parcel selected. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use a tool called, where is it here? Not called transfer parcels. Oh, nope, not reconstruction seeds. Interesting. Where is it? Let's go back here and look. And it should be Reconstruct Boundaries. Oh, I had lines selected, didn't I? If I have just a parcel, then it's on there. It's another hint. Previously, I selected the parcel, activated the record, and I said, show me all the lines with that record. And because I only had lines, certain tools would not work. Be aware when it's limiting and when it's only going to show certain tools when you have certain things selected. So on here now, I can see I have this thing called Reconstruct Boundaries. And again, at Reconstruct Boundary, it's going to look to my record. going to look at and analyze the lines associated with that record and determine whether or not there's ways that I can consolidate those lines into a smaller number of lines on here, which it just did. It took the COGO values and aggregated them together. Also took the COGO types, by the way, and aggregated those together. So if there was entered values and from geometry, it would mark it that this was from geometry. It wasn't necessarily all the same. So it will analyze it. And often I'll go through and clean up parcels that way. Chris, I see a comment here on the road intersection where you traced all the way around to maintain the cusp. Would it not adjust the non-trace lines to the cusp points? Yes. Wouldn't it be preferable to move the cusp points to the non-trace lines? Yeah, you've got to be careful with that, though, in that when you're adjusting and doing merged lines on there, it's going to warp those curves. So you just want to be careful with that. And if we get to the end and we'll see if I'll see if I can show you how to do that and what's going on there. All right. So I have here a parcel on here, and I've just gone and sort of modified the geometry, the definition of the lines that are used to go and build that parcel according to the record. What I'm going to do now is show you a couple different scenarios in which I have a new parcel that I want to go and build. And here's where that new parcel is, right? I built it. That's what the traverse says it should be. That's where it's supposed to go. A couple ways of doing it. If this is truly a new parcel and it's not a adjust, but a new parcel, the normal workflow would be create a record. Always create a record. Demo parcel. All right. And I don't, maybe this is some sort of other on here. So I now have a new record in here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select these lines. All right. Now, normally you would go in here and you start selecting, and the reality is that's not the way to go and do this. If I have a set that has lines drawn already, what you can do is you can go to that layer and right click and say, select all the visible features on that layer. And it will only select the ones that are visible in your current view extent as part of that. And I can go and do that, and it will automatically copy them for me. All right. So I now have these on here. I've got a record, an active record. I can go into my workflows and do a copy lines to my tax parcels, takes those and copies them into my tax parcel line. They have been copied into tax lines. It's still showing the construction lines. When I turn them off, it will now, these are the tax lines that are in here. And it actually took the COGO values for them. However, if I look at this, there is no value here for the COGO type. So I just want to be aware of it. The COGO types are very important inside of the parcel fabric. Think about whether or not you want to go and set them all to be entered, because you did enter them originally, right? When I copy lines and put them into a copy lines to, it will automatically attempt to create a seed. And a seed basically, again, is an indicator that in fact, the lines that you're copying, they form closed polygons. So I now know that these lines, they form a closed polygon. I'm good with this. I can go back here and say, go ahead and build my active record. And build this active record. I now have a new parcel that's been built from my lines on here. Now the challenge is, how do I get this to go and be located where it wants to be? How can I go and do it? And then the question is, which do I adjust? How do I adjust it in here? Go through a couple scenarios. Most times, if I would go into an Align Parcels here, all right, what Align Parcels doing, again, it actually turns out that Align Parcels is two different sets of tools built into this at the same time. This first portion here is basically the transform tool. The transform tool wants you to create links between points. And you can say, I want to point here to here. This goes here to here. This goes here to here. This goes here to here, and so on all the way around. All right, that's the transform tool inside. And if we were to actually go and look at it, there is a tool called transform, and it wants you to create links on there. The other tool is this tool here, which is point to edge tool. This point to edge tool is the one that actually I incorrectly showed here. That's the one that will take where there are no corresponding points in here and attempt to go and move that line or move that point so it is coincident with the line. Now this specific example becomes problematic because as I start upping my buffer here, I'm going to see that I've got issues here. I've got issues here, and that there's multiple areas where it doesn't quite fit correctly. All right. How am I going to go and do this? For example, if I move this over here, I've got a problem with this. So again, let's just show you an example here. If I move this out to 30, still not big enough. What happens 35? Let's go and make sure we do this. What happens with 40 when we go and put 40 in? Yeah, the first thing is that you've got to make sure that it covers all of this, that all of the points that will be adjusted are inside of the area. And then we can attempt it to go and go ahead and generate these points on its own. But when we have examples like this is going to cause us problems, and it's better just to go and add your own points, because that way you'll definitely tell where you want these things to go. So in this case, I can say this goes to here, this goes to here, and I would probably zoom in a little bit closer. This goes to here. This goes to here. This goes to here. By the way, those links, they're bi-directional, in that when I say this one goes to here, that really doesn't mean that. It just means it's linked those two together. And now, depending upon what gets adjusted, that's going to determine how it actually gets adjusted in here. All right, whether the selected parcel moves to the other, because that's really what's happening, is that in this case, we were taking the new and moving it to the old, but we can actually go and toggle it. And when we toggle it, whatever is selected is what's going to be adjusted. So in this case, we can toggle this and it will select everything else on here. All right, and we'll select everything else in here. And now the old would be adjusted to the new. So we said that's the first part. We actually have a couple other areas in here. For example, we have a point here that we've got to go and adjust. So we want to look at this second part of the tool, which is the point to edge. And usually my preference is at least do half of your one up here, let it go and generate and give you a preview on here. All right, and that's what this is going to look like when it gets done adjusting this here to here, here to here. this looks like this is going to be an issue in here. We're going to have to do additional cleanup on here. We could do Align, look at it, go ahead and adjust everything out. Go ahead and do that. Again, you see what happens over in here, what happens in here. There's always problems with it. Not always problems. It actually is a very nice tool, really helpful tool, but there are instances where it can cause you problems. Again, if we said this was supposed to go to here, that's not where it went. And we might have to go and do an align features to go and clean that up. By the way, if we look right under Align Parcels is Align Features. So now we can draw a line and say, we want to go from here to here to here. All right. And we want to make sure that it falls completely inside the buffer. So this line here, we have to adjust this buffer so it at least falls all the way in. And when we do that, we notice that there's another point here it's going to catch. Maybe we only do it on the left side, or excuse me, on the right side of this parcel. Right side of that line, go ahead and align this. These techniques, basically, they're things that you learn as you start using these things more and more and more. It's not going to come intuitively. You're going to have to come into and experience issues like this as you go through here. All right. When I did that, let me go in here and show you it actually, because I used copy lines 2, and I've got one on top of the other now. If I go in here and select, I actually have 2 parcels. This was the new one that I just built, and here's my old one. Now, if in fact this is a split or a cut, a clip out of it, I would then go and do the clip out everything else underneath, and it would mark as historic. But in this case, I put it on top. And again, maybe that's not what I wanted to do. Maybe I just wanted to redefine what these things were. So let me go down here again and go down to copy lines 2 and undo that completely. All right, so I'm back now to where I was. Yeah, maybe what I wanted to do was not that, but I wanted to go and redefine this parcel that I had. So let me select the parcel and use that technique that I showed you earlier, in which I say, go ahead and activate the record of that parcel so I know what that parcel is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and use these new lines to redefine them. And I'm going to go through a couple of procedures. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this parcel and shrink it to seed. So it took the parcel and shrunk it. But the problem is I've still got the old lines. And if I go over here and say, just show me my active lines, oh, now I can look at them and I can go and select my old lines. Let's turn this off for a minute. I can select my old lines and delete them. I don't want to delete my seed. Delete them. I can go and turn these back on. I can go and select my lines again. And then I can copy them. I can copy them and I can paste them into my tax lines. Again, turning this off. So I have all my lines built again. I don't want to move that. And then I can go and tell it to rebuild. Okay, I can do that. Notice I had an active record. So when I say go ahead and rebuild this, it will rebuild it. I then still have to go and do this adjustment, but I don't have to do a clip now. I've not built it on top of something else. I built it where it was. And intuitively for me, it's at this point that I say, I know I've got problems here. Let me just go and say, okay, let's move this one over to 2. All right, and let's manage it this way. And look at what's happening here. When I do this, what happens is it's changing the polygon geometry. And I go and undo that just so we can go through this and say, why is it doing that? One more time here. There we go. Why is it doing that? Turns out that if I go to my project options and I go to my editing here, there is in fact this option here as far as to geometry. Whether or not it goes and proportionally changes the geometry on here, let's uncheck both of these. Let's go back here and let's redo that here. Still works that way. Let's go back here, back to here, and now tell it to do both of them. See if that makes a difference in here. All right. Still does it. So you want to be aware with this option, with merge points, that there's still a little weird things that are going to go on here with it. You may want to go and tell it to go and redo and shrink to seed on all these adjoining ones while you're redefining them, because that's another option. But there's a problem there. All right, let's undo this. That's a problem in that if I shrink this to seed, and I'm going to go back here a couple times here, merge the points. Shrink to seed. Okay. So if I go in here and I say, well, let's go and rebuild this. All right, and I do a shrink to seeds. And I select this, and I don't have an active record here. By the way, I'm on merge points here. That's why I was doing that. I don't have an active record here, but I say shrink to seed. I go through this same process. And then I go and I select my lines. Select my lines here. All right. And then I copy and I paste those lines in. Come on. I didn't want to paste them. I think I pasted them onto here. Yeah. Undo that. Sorry. Copy these lines and paste them special into my tax lines again. So now I've got tax lines in here. Let's go ahead and rebuild this by Reconstruct from seeds. It's rebuilt it. Should be fine. All right, it should be fine. However, here's where I want to make sure you understand what we just did. Those lines that I just copied and pasted in. All right, let's go and take them and let's go through and see what's associated with this parcel now. Let's activate the parcel. Let's go and show me all the lines that are associated with it. Those lines are not the same lines. Those lines are the old lines. They are not the new lines that are part of it. When you're using shrink to seed and reconstruct from seed, you always want to make sure that you take, before you shrink to seed, you activate that so that anything you build inside of there, gets the record attributes properly set and populated on there. Be careful with shrink to seed and reconstruct from seed. It's so simple to say, well, I can go and do this and not have to worry about it. The problem is it's actually looking good geometrically, just like I did on that first realign features. It looked good, but it actually corrupted the actual attribution of the lines that it was building. Want to make sure that if I'm using shrink to see to rebuild things, I go through this process of go in here, select the parcel that I want to go and rebuild, select this parcel, and make sure I activate the record of that parcel. Then I can go in and do things like select all the lines associated with this parcel. I can go in here and, oh, look at this. Look at this. So if I go in and say, just show me my active right now, I don't have a line here. You want to make sure that everything is properly established inside the parcel fabric. And again, this has gone off into a really deep rabbit hole, but everything inside the parcel fabric, everything, every feature inside of the parcel fabric, I can show it to you right here. Everything in a parcel fabric is supposed to have a record with it. Supposed to have a record with it. Every feature is supposed to be associated with a record. And if it's not associated with a record, it might look cartographically great. It might look like it's really good. It works well. But when you start looking at the integrity of it, when you start looking at, oh, well, how come some of my functions don't work? It's because it's not been built correctly. Again, you want to make sure that while you're building this, you're following those rules and remembering in the back of your head the topology rules and the validation rules that are part of the parcel fabric. All right. What else do we want to go and look at? So finish here. How would I do this? Again, let's select this parcel. Let's go and activate the actual on here. Let's go and see what the records are or what everything is that we have on this. And it will go and activate it and select all of them. Here's all of our tax lines. Let's show only the things that are part of this right now. And know, okay, when we've got this, we can delete these lines. We can delete these lines in here, even delete these lines in here. Delete that in here. But if we tell it, go ahead and build our active record, it will create new lines in here. And it will should create new points in here for those. Again, this is one of those things where you just want to be real careful when you're going to rebuild this. It is tricky to go and move these things together. It's almost like you want to be real careful one by one to make sure that it doesn't corrupt them. Merge points, again, you want to watch it to see what's happening in here. When I do merge points, it's merging points over to here. I've got something in here. I can go here. And in this case, can I unselect this? I can take it out of here. Say, don't look at that one. Only look at these two and go 2. And you'll see it's actually going to bend that line here. So we have 2 and 1. Careful. I purposely gave you an example that's really problematic on here, really tough to go and solve. So is it better to just go and rebuild it and then try to do a parcel align on here? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's better to go in here and build your parcel and then move the adjacent ones to it using things like align features. in here. Let's look at align features in here. We probably don't need that much. Go here to here, to here, to here, on here. Sides. And I would probably undo that last one and be a little bit more selected here, you know, what I'm doing here. Then I would go here to here. And here, only get on the left side of this, excuse me, the right side of this, and go and do it that way. And then it would come in both sides. And I would probably go back to here. I would also remember to go and build my overall extent again to make sure everything's correct in here. And I would look at these elements here. All right, what I'm doing in there. In this case, I think it actually bent that line. And if I go in here and take that line, that one single line, actually I've got 4 lines here. I've got this one here, get this one here, this one here, and this one here. I might go and split that line here. And delete that out. Notice the change in here. So, summary. Sometimes it's easy. Most times it's not. It's going to be a series of adjustments. You want to look at things such as, do I have to rebuild this, or do I just take it and throw out what I have and create a new one completely? Can I use the geometry? Can I not use the geometry? What do I have to do? And remember, just because you fix the geometry doesn't mean that the actual attribution is still valid. Make sure it's building the record correctly. Make sure it's not changing and corrupting the COGO values on there. Or make sure if it is retaining the COGO values, make sure you haven't moved that line to someplace that it shouldn't be. All right, is there any other comments in here, Chris?
Not in the chat.
Not in the chat. So let's go back here and see if we can address that one issue in here where we've got this here. And let's go, and we've got in here, we've also got, for example, this is the lot definition of this. Here's my tax parcel. Here's my lot number 1. Here's the overall subdivision line. And so the question was, on the road intersection where you traced all the way around to maintain the cusp, would it not adjust the non-traced lines to the cusp points? Would it be preferable to move the cusp points to the non-traced lines? In this case, not always. If I had 2 parcels with different curves here, for example, let's go and simplify this again. Let's go and create a new parcel and just use that. And let's go and create tax lines, and we'll put them here to here, and then we'll put a curve in, and that curve can be here to here, and then we'll do a line up to here, just so we can show you something. And this, by the way, Those are all, I used polylines. Let's go back here and modify that and convert that all the way down here, split into Kogo lines. These are tax lines. Here we go. So those are all Kogo lines now. And if we were to go and use our same function here, let's, by the way, and select this. Let's go all the way and let's create a seed. Let's do the parcel build on here. Well, let's go through this now. All right. So if we go in here and try to use merge points on here, all right, let's go and use that merge points on here and say we merge these 2 points here and move them to 1. You can see that it's moving this and it's converting it. But if I go in here and do this and then go and do this back to 1, you'll see here that while it moves the ends of the lines, it doesn't necessarily adjust the lines. That I still am going to have to go and adjust by doing a align features. I'm still going to have to adjust the curve here so that it matches the correct one on here. Again, I'm also going to remember to go to here and finish and retain the cusps on there. All right. Build your parcel fabric from meets and bounds, and thus have all the original Kogo values stored in there. Let's have a function or technique to display those original pre-adjusted lines so that you can visually see the magnitude of the adjustments that you have made. No, there isn't. The Kogo values are stored as attribution against the lines, but there's nothing reflecting what might have been beforehand, other than you can go in here and you can label these by actually showing, on here, that's here. In this case, we're showing right, left, and other. But you can show the bearing and distance on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean and show it to reflect sort of what ArcMap Parcel Fabric used to call the measurement view versus the geometry or construction view, I think they used to call it. So the answer is no, there's nothing to show you where it shouldn't be. One more thing, under quality, is there a layer that allows you to show where it does not reflect the Kogo values? No, it does not. So that might be a good thing that we want to have in here, where the Kogo values that are on here do not necessarily reflect where they should be. However, you want to be careful with that, because on our lines, on Kogo lines, and I'm just going to go and select this Kogo line here just so we can see it and remind everybody that on Kogo lines, there's not just from geometry, but whether or not it had any sort of rotation and scaling when you went and created it. That rotation and scaling comes from ground to grid. If I have a ground to grid set, it will go and record what that rotation is and that scaling is when I input the original Kogo, but it doesn't reflect anything as far as adjustments or anything of that sort. So, in conclusion, I'm not sure whether we actually solved all of your problems, but I think we just further demonstrated some of the issues associated with it, some of the tools you might consider to use, and some of the challenge that you'll have with those tools. Hopefully you learned something here, and hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561 691 3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.